It all started on a cold, windy evening when I realized something wasn't right. Arya, my younger sister, had gone out earlier that afternoon to meet a friend, but by the time the sun dipped behind the horizon, she still hadn't returned. At first, I thought she was just running late. Arya was always a bit carefree about time, but something in my gut told me this was different. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. A strange uneasiness crept over me, the kind that tightens your chest and makes every sound in the house feel louder than it should. I walked around the living room, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe her battery died, maybe she was still chatting with her friend, there were a dozen harmless explanations. But as the hours passed, those excuses felt weaker and weaker. I dialed her friend's number, hoping to hear her cheerful voice in the background, but her friend said Arya had left almost 3 hours ago. That was when the first wave of panic truly hit me. I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the night. The streets felt unnervingly quiet, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. The dim glow from the streetlights barely pierced the fog rolling in, and every shadow seemed to stretch a little too far. I walked the path Arya would have taken home, my eyes scanning every corner. I kept calling her name, my voice trembling against the empty air. Then I saw it, her scarf, lying on the wet pavement. It was the one I had knitted for her last winter, pale blue with a small tear at the end. My hand shook as I picked it up, my mind racing with questions I didn't want answers to. There were no other signs of her, no footprints, no sound except for the faint rustle of leaves in the cold wind. In that moment, I knew something horrible had happened. Arya wouldn't just vanish like this. Whatever took her, or whoever, was still out there. And somehow, I felt they might be closer than I dared to imagine. I was sitting on the couch, still clutching Arya's scarf in my hands, when my phone suddenly rang. The sound made me jump, it was so sharp, so sudden, it felt like it cut through the silence in the room. My heart pounded as I glanced at the screen. The number was unfamiliar, but something deep inside told me to answer. I hesitated for a second, my thumb hovering over the accept button, before finally pressing it. At first, there was nothing. Just dead air. I was about to hang up when I heard it, a slow, shaky breath on the other end. It wasn't Arya. The breathing was too heavy, too deliberate. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling. For a moment, I thought they wouldn't respond, but then a distorted, almost mechanical whisper came through. "She's cold now." My blood ran ice cold. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but my throat felt tight, as if invisible hands were gripping it. "Who are you? Where's my sister?" I finally managed to force out. There was a low chuckle. Not loud, not manic, but quiet and chilling, like someone enjoying a cruel secret. The voice spoke again, "You should have kept her inside. The woods don't forgive." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. Before I could say another word, the call ended. The silence that followed was worse than the voice itself. I sat there, staring at my phone screen, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to believe it was some sick prank, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was something about that voice, something that felt wrong, inhuman even. I tried calling the number back, but it was already disconnected. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Whoever that was knew something about Arya, maybe even where she was now. And the mention of the woods. I glanced toward the dark shape swaying outside the window. The trees stood like tall, silent watchers, and for the first time in my life, I felt they were hiding something from me. Something I might not be ready to find. That night, I couldn't sleep. The voice from the phone call kept replaying in my mind, each word sinking deeper like a splinter I couldn't remove. The woods don't forgive. It felt less like a threat and more like a warning. I knew I couldn't just sit there and wait for answers. I had to find something, anything, that could lead me to Arya. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The fog had thickened, curling around my ankles like cold smoke. Every creak of the old porch and distant rustle in the grass made my nerves jolt. I retraced Arya's route again, moving slower this time, letting the beam of light sweep over the ground, the bushes, the edges of the street. That's when I saw it, faint scuff marks near the curb, as if someone had been dragged. My chest tightened. Following the marks, I found myself at the edge of the woods. The trees loomed tall and twisted, their branches knitting together overhead, blotting out the moonlight. I hesitated, but then noticed something hanging from a low branch, a small silver pendant. It was Arya's. I remembered when she bought it at the summer fair, a tiny charm shaped like a crescent moon. My fingers shook as I took it, my pulse pounding in my ears. Deeper in the shadows, my flashlight caught something else, a crumpled piece of paper wedged between roots. It was damp, the ink smudged, but I could still make out part of the message, "Don't follow." My breath caught. It didn't feel like a warning meant to protect me, it felt like a challenge. The air around me grew heavier, colder, as though the forest itself was watching. My instinct screamed to turn back, but I couldn't. Arya was out there somewhere, and these clues were leading me straight to her, or to whatever had taken her. The shadows seemed to shift as I moved forward, and I realized something terrifying: I wasn't alone. The deeper I went into the woods, the more the darkness seemed to close in around me. My flashlight flickered, as if struggling against the heavy, suffocating air. I could hear faint movements in the distance, twigs snapping, leaves crunching, but they didn't sound like the footsteps of an animal. They were too deliberate, too slow, as if someone was following me and wanted me to know. I gripped Arya's pendant tightly in my palm and forced myself forward. My breaths came fast, fogging the cold night air. Then, ahead of me, I saw it, a faint glow, swaying gently, like a lantern in the wind. I moved closer, every muscle in my body screaming to turn back. As I approached, the figure holding the light came into view. They stood in a long, tattered coat, their face hidden behind a cracked porcelain mask. In one hand, they held the lantern. In the other, Arya's phone. My voice trembled as I shouted, "Where is she?" The masked figure tilted their head slowly, as if studying me. Then, they dropped the phone into the dirt and took a single step forward. "I told you not to follow," they said in that same distorted voice I'd heard over the phone. My flashlight shook in my grip. "What did you do to her?" I demanded. The figure laughed softly, a sound so cold it made my skin crawl. Without warning, they reached into their coat and pulled out something that made my stomach drop, Arya's scarf, stained dark. I lunged forward, but they stepped back into the shadows. The lantern light dimmed, and for a moment, I thought they'd vanished entirely. Then, from behind me, I felt a cold breath against my ear. "She's still here, somewhere." I spun around, but there was nothing. Just trees and darkness. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Whoever they weren't afraid of me, and they knew I was completely at their mercy. I stumbled out of the woods just as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. My clothes were torn, my hands scraped, and Arya's pendant felt like ice in my pocket. The masked figure was gone, disappearing as if they had melted into the trees, leaving me with nothing but questions, and the suffocating weight of dread. I should have felt relief being out in the open again, but instead, the daylight only made everything seem more wrong. The police didn't believe me. They searched the woods, of course, but they found no footprints, no lantern, no scarf. Even Arya's phone had vanished from where I'd seen it fall. They asked if I was sure I hadn't imagined it, if maybe stress and exhaustion were playing tricks on me. I wanted to scream at them. How could I imagine the voice? The mask? The cold breath on my neck? But I knew they wouldn't understand. Days turned into weeks, and still, Arya didn't come home. Her room stayed exactly as she had left it. Clothes folded neatly on the bed, the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the air. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear the floorboards creak in the hallway, or the soft sound of a door closing when no one else was in the house. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep down, I knew better. The worst part was the dreams. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, with the image of that cracked porcelain mask staring down at me. In the dreams, the figure didn't speak, they only stood there, holding Arya's scarf, swaying like a shadow in the corner. And sometimes, I could hear Arya's voice calling my name, muffled and distant, like she was trapped somewhere just beyond reach. Even now, I feel watched. Whether it's in my home, walking down the street, or passing by the edge of the woods, there's always that prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The masked figure is still out there. And I can't shake the feeling that they aren't finished with me yet.